All right. Yeah, it seems like everything is fine with our broadcast. And yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to our next workshop here at Tonnest, here on Ton Communities, Ton Foundation's official social media channels. My name is Alec. I'll be hosting this session, and you might already watched our previous workshops that we are hosting on a constantly basis, somewhere around 2 to 3 times per week. And yeah, this time we are very happy to invite our good old friend and partner Zain Khan from Cointelegraph, who will be giving a workshop about Web3 media marketing. That's actually one of the topics that we didn't touch before. I mean, in terms of the working with Web3 media, and I think that would be a very great deep dive into the workshop, and we can also cover your questions as well. And before we start, I'd like to remind everyone about our today's format. So we have our broadcast here on Zoom, but the majority of our audience are watching this live streamed on our YouTube channel and on our X page. So those of you who will be having any questions, please feel free to send them in the chat, and I'll be helping Zain to facilitate all that questions, and we'll be going through all the questions closer to the end of the session. And yeah, we can spend the first half of the session for the workshop itself, and the second half for maybe around 20 minutes, depending on how fast or how slow Zain goes with the content. We can spend the second half to the Q&A part. And yeah, those of you who will be joining on Zoom, there will not be many people actually, but still, those of you who will be on Zoom, you will be having a priority. Just raise your hand and ask your question with your voice. And in order to get our recording of this session, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will be keeping all the recordings on our YouTube channel. And I think that is it. That is short for the intro. Without further ado, Zain, hello. First of all, thank you so much for your effort. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much for bringing another interesting topic. This is actually a second workshop with you. And before we start, please tell us briefly about yourself, about your background.
Thank you, Alec. Thank you, Ton Foundation as well for setting this up and creating a space where builders can actually talk and learn together. For everyone who doesn't know me, I'm Zen. For me, media and marketing is like my bread and butter, and this is something that I live on. And I thought it's always good to share these sort of ideas that I've learned over time with everyone. So that's why we are here. I'm tuning in from Dubai, and I've got some three very cool and interesting subjects. As Alec mentioned, like content is all about participation as well. So I'll keep this presentation minimized to 35, 40 minutes and walk over you guys with what I want to share. It's majorly four different things. But once we are done, it'll be great to have any sort of questions, any feedback, anything that you want to know while we are here. So yeah, with that, Alec, we can start sharing the screen and kick off.
All right, let me start the screen sharing. Please confirm if that is working.
Yes, I can
Mhm.
see from my side, but I'm assuming it's going to be okay. So, all right, cool, folks. Let's dig into the subject of taming your marketing dragons. And before we kickstart this presentation, I specifically kind of understand the Ton builders, the ecosystem around Telegram. And I'm very much a persistent believer that this platform has a chance to actually solve many problems that other blockchains are not able to solve. So here I am, talking about how marketing and media we should look at from a Web3 perspective, especially sharing my learnings, the models that I've learned over time, and some things that we do practice as an industry. Let's kick off and see how we can actually, tame these marketing dragons, right? So Alec, next slide. Before we, kick into the workshop, I want to set the expectations and the purpose very clear. Um, Many a times, we're asked this question, like, what is the right time for marketing? So I want to take you firstly through that side of journey, like what actually is the right time to market. The second thing is some of the common roadblocks, that I've witnessed or, have talked with my friends and circle and community and builders and, all different sort of media together. And I've realized that there are certain roadblocks that are very common for everyone. So we're going to dig into that. The third and the most important part, I'd say, of this particular workshop is a model that I've learned over time and something which I want to share with you guys as well, called the PESO model. It is the abbreviation basically means paid, earned, shared, and owned media. So how this PESO model actually works together. And lastly, before once we complete the PESO model, its background and stuff, I want to talk to you about how you can create your content map and what sort of actionables you can take from this particular workshop for everyone who's here or who's watching this later down as well. So yeah, let's move in, Alec, to the next slide, the problem, right? Like, let's start about the context of the problem first, right? Like the bigger thing that we've realized that, hey, we have all these sort of algorithms that work on Google, now also on AI. And AI, there's so many different platforms, but let's say the common ones like ChatGPT and a few others, Gemini of Google, for example, or social media, right? So each of these platform has a different sort of an algorithm that works, so if you want to replicate what you've learned in Google on AI, it may or may not work. Most chances are there that it will not work, right? So, and similarly comes social media as well. Social media has a great power to change things, and we're going to talk how exactly this comes under the PESO model as well. But each social media platform is unique, so there are certain social media platforms like for example, LinkedIn, which is less cluttered, more professional. And then there are certain channels like Instagram, which are more easy to create. So to set the context further, there are many marketing efforts that are done together to make a project successful. But many projects start with guerrilla marketing in the Web3 space, right? So, that's kind of a very common thing that I've observed over time while working with so many. And then eventually it moves to these bounties and these sort of ambassador-led programs, which makes the content fall under UGC, user-generated content. So why I'm talking about this is because I see this context connected to a black hole. Now, you might be wondering what exactly is this black hole, right? So in the Web3 space, comparing from the Web2 side of things, we have seen that airdrops are very common, right? In this space, this is the particular big black hole that I want to talk about. And this, of course, attracts certain users, but they're more of a mercenaries than actual real users. They're with you because of an incentive that you're giving and feeding them. And the moment this incentive is taken back or it's changed, their way of behavior in reacting with your platform changes as well. So the black hole can be fixed by sticking to the basics, sticking to the traditional methods of how things work. And media as well as marketing, there's no one fix for all, right? So you have to try different combinations. Most importantly, do some sort of PESO model work, which we're going to dig in later. But think of your product or your service specifically and then figure out, a narrative on top of it. The second big black hole, of course, connected to airdrops and other sort of efforts that are done in marketing, is people lose a lot of money on marketing, right? And I've interacted with so many folks who've said, hey, we tried this, we tried that, we burned 10 million, on marketing. I'm like, okay, why didn't you do this? And I don't know if you folks are, focusing what's happening at the moment. Let's say token is coming up, right? Now, as a more deeper example of this black hole, there will be so many side events that will happen in Singapore as a part of token. But how many can you actually attend, and the founders are spending huge amount of money, 100 150K, on a single event. What will be the outcome of this investment that they're making on an event is great, but what could be the right way to cater down this? So it leads us to our next part of this presentation, which is also on the problem statement, like what exactly is the problem that we are facing. And the problem that I see from my perspective, personal learning and industry experience, is that we are not sure of how to begin and when to begin, right? So that's why the previous question of when is the right time to do marketing. I believe the right time to do marketing is always now, and it's never too early to begin. You can actually figure out what will be the right target audience, so to say, for your marketing, but you should always begin a bit early, even if you're in early stages of creating your product, for example. A lot of people face this local global paradox. So what I mean by this is that People, we all want to target the entire industry, the entire ecosystem, the complete market, let's say B2B as well as B2C together. Let's assume I'm based in Dubai, so we want to target UAE, but we also want to target global audience with our services. So that's the sort of local global paradox, right? So how to solve this paradox is actually by doing a survey and figuring out something that's unique to your and easily as a low-hanging fruit, to your particular geography, right? So always start local first, test, build things, see how it comes, collect feedback, and eventually with phases plan a global landscape, unless you have a different sort of a product landscape, to cater. Um, we also have another problem in the space, which is more of a challenge, so to say, which I'm going to cover in the next slides as well. The skeptical audience, that we have. So it's limited as well as skeptical. People in the space, in the Web3 space, are still not wanting to experiment with these wallets, and they're scared about security and what will happen. And, there's so many hacks happening in the region with different products. For example, the regulations are unclear as well, which is also this big uncertainty, which is, I think, a problem. So the way to cater this is by working on a model that actually works. And Alec, if we go down to the next slide, I want to talk about a more deeper dive into these challenges that I talked, right? So divided into three things. The first is, of course, local versus global. I want to lay emphasis on this again. Please start local first. Focus on users in your particular geography, something that you can target with your team, with your entire bandwidth that you can actually target in locally in your area, and focus on learning what will improve your product, right? So start thinking of your retention at the first go when it comes to marketing. Don't just think of getting the customers acquired, but also think of how you could retain these sort of initial customers that you're attracting. One easy way to solve this local global challenge, of course, is by doing surveys. The surveys can either be digital in nature or physical in nature. Once you do a survey, you get some sort of a feedback from potential users in your market space, and then you can solve this dilemma. The second challenge that I see with founders, and I want to learn from you, like how exactly do you see this, is I want to create then the best product, the best looking website, the best looking UI, the best looking UX. And it is actually never the case, right? You can't really start by having the best UI. It's more important to have a working prototype with you first, slowly, gradually, with getting more users, doing some sort of marketing efforts to top up more users and increasing your sales is the right time where you start improving your UI UX. So don't try to think of as a perfectionist here. Try to think of something that actually solves your problem at the first go. Like if you look at, and I can give you so many examples on this, but I'll stick around to Steve Jobs, the guy that I really admire and his marketing styles that I still learn from. Um, he didn't start with the perfect logo or the perfect Apple, right? He just started, and eventually over time, if you see how Apple migrated, I would say, as a brand, is what we see at the moment. But it wasn't the case at the start, right? It improved over time. So please start. Building is, of course, not easy. So it's important to start and improve your product on the go. Always try and test your product market fit of your product or service with your initial target customers. That's super important. The third challenge that I've seen is, hey, where do we get the first set of users coming in? And I think I have a very clear answer to this after spending a lot of time to figuring out, what could be the right way, to do this. I think the best way to do this is to work on a freemium tier model at the start and eventually let people understand and learn, improve your product, as well as get a taste of your quality. If you're confident that you're solving a real problem and it helps, and what you're building is actually going to be meaningful, I'm sure you can de-risk, I would say, your product by starting a freemium model. Eventually, you can create tiers of subscriptions or different mechanisms to let the users pay you for your service or the product, but you can easily start with a freemium tier at the first. It's important to get in those early users, right? So, and this is where Web3 also plays a big role, right? So your community is, what decides this sort of free tier, users initially to come up with you, and so start building your community. You could offer initially, referrals, let's say for your enterprise clients, depending on what sort of product or service you have, or you could offer bulk based discounts. Let's say if it's a B2B product sell you want to do, you could have referrals that actually still work great in the retail industry when it comes to product or services. So, this is our deep dive into these challenges. But let's go next on this, right? Like something that I want to emphasize on, like, and I'm doing this first time on the camera with all of you on this, right? So marketing, I personally believe, has become a sort of a necessary evil. And why I say this particularly is because you cannot really survive with it. But if you look at successful projects that have survived without marketing, and I want to, quote unquote Telegram here, which has got billions of users, and Pavel, a guy who is, and I was watching his YouTube podcast as well, where he was talking about where he never really spent money on marketing, right? So this, I think, is one of the very rare products that have sprouted over years of the industry, where the initial money on marketing wasn't actually spent to acquire customers, but they built something that got a billion users in. Very unique case. I would say this is 1% of the 1% success ideal, case scenario, but it's difficult to achieve. That's why I'm calling marketing our business as a necessary evil in this space. And you might think of the most innovative idea, but it still might not be unique. You can certainly tweak and, make it sound or look like unique, but somebody somewhere in this connected human age might still be experimenting with it, right? So the idea's success is interdependent on your marketing image, which is in the views of your potential buyers, right? For a B2B side, institutions, or retail, when it comes to the B2C side of stuff. So marketing for sure has now, in the present age in 2025, while we're streaming this, has become a really necessary evil. And as I say this, I have a model which I'm sure you guys can replicate on yourself without any additional external help, and start building this sort of using this necessary evil, and as I said, taming your marketing dragon with this. Let's go next, Alec. And here, as you see this particular timeline, right? So I want to dig in and firstly give credit to Guinea, person who's developed this model called PESO model. This was particularly recently developed, I would say, in 2019. This development happened because of her own marketing agency's requirement, where she wanted to fulfill and ensure that their clients are super happy. But they didn't know the right way to do this, right? That's why this model was particularly created. And once it was launched for their own agency, it was, of course, out for external other agencies to learn in 2019, and eventually with a book release in 2022. The book is called Spinsucks. It's available. You guys should read. I've read it too. Very nice, detailed. But if you can't, but anyway, I'm gonna take you through this workshop more detailed on the PESO side of things and your content map. So with this, I want to go into AI as well, right? So one is, of course, the PESO model, which we're digging in deeper after a few minutes. And I want to double check with Alec if there would be any questions that we've sprouted till now, answer them and then start. But the second necessary evil right now is AI. And AI is impacting all industries in a good way from my perspective. So it's better to have this human AI interaction working well. Social media is a very crucial part of this, and you could basically right now, create these sort of AI-driven social media content strategies for you, where the narrative is actually driven by you, a human at the end of the day. There's so many tools. I've just mentioned one here. Of course, I'll share my details if you want to look into my sort of detailed tools that I particularly advise or use myself. But yeah, like start using AI to your own advantage. Start building your own, let's say, social media, small plug with AI sort of tools. The third important part of this timeline, as you see, is micro AI, as I've mentioned. So, of course, one is your social media, but the second is where you can use these AI tools right now, or, depends on how you, really place yourself and what sort of skill sets you have. But you could anyway create micro content And when I say micro content, it's basically starting off, let's say, a podcast or an AMA or other forms of video content that can be repurposed, broken down into smaller clips. There's so many tools like Opus Clip, for example, where just insert the link of your podcast, of your video, of your AMA, of your content, and eventually receive these smaller bites with captions that you can eventually put down on your social calendar and let it eventually grow for you, and grow an organic audience around either you or your product. It could be replicated in both ways. um, so yeah, so far, we've covered the PESO model, we've covered the SM side of AI, we've covered how micro content could also be driven by AI, but something that makes a lot more sense is, of course, press releases. I can probably have a whole workshop around how PRs work, but right now I'm just focusing on embargo PRs, which basically means that you write down your news at the start, share it with journalists in your target market, and then use sort of these marketing tech, martech tools, which are available, which have actually been available for a long time, but they're getting more mainstream now, where you can use these tools, reach out to journalists with your embargo sort of PR content. And PRs can be of so many different kinds, right? I think there's 7, 8 different varieties. Maybe this could be a title, if you guys want to do a workshop on this with me the next time, this could be a particular subject that we dig in. But anyway, like having these sort of embargo PRs, let me simplify what I mean by embargo. It's basically, you just set down a particular date until which the release that you're doing in the market is tied to only journalists. So the people pick up, and journalists love this. It's like, hey, like I have news before it actually goes mainstream, and I want to, maybe feature this or focus on this or, talk about this, right? So that is where embargo PRs come into the picture. You have a certain timeline, a date, and a time when it actually the news goes out of the media hand and in public. And in this duration of embargo period, it's with the journalist, and they can write, read, learn more about this and prepare their content calendars. So yeah, that brings me to the last part of this particular timeline that we are watching. Okay, we've done all of this, but how do we measure this, right? Like it's a very important feature to quantify, and our thirst for this quantification is quite natural and understandable. Certain marketing efforts, this is why marketing agencies are not able to really succeed in retaining their clients, because they don't know what metrics they should measure the success of a PR on. Everybody says, okay, great, views and impressions and all of that, engagements. But if I'm paying something, how do I actually measure the output that I receive? And that's where, Guinea's model comes into picture. But traditionally, there are certain metrics that have been used. I'm just emphasizing on two metrics here, which is advertising value equivalency. There's a nice mathematical formula, if you guys want to look at how to calculate this. Or the second one, which is also quite traditional in its nature and used by tons of big marketing agencies, is share of voice. Like, what share of voice do you have on a particular marketing media platform at a particular stage that generates interest for you? So with this, Alec, I take a quick break and double check if we have any questions, or if we don't, then we can of course proceed ahead.
All right, let me quickly check the live chats. And yeah, those of you who are watching us, please feel free to leave your questions in the live chats, and I will be facilitating and bringing them to Zain.
Superb, Alec. If we
And
don't,
yeah, I see one question in the YouTube's chat. I just copied and pasted that question here
okay.
on Zoom. It says, "Hi Zain, great talk for a team with basically zero marketing budget. Where do we focus in the PESO model? Is just starting with our own blog X enough?"
Very, very good, and good that somebody's actually asking this question. I don't know if you know your name, but well done. And why I'm saying this is because this is exactly what I'm going to take you through now, right? To answer your question first, very clearly, with, let's say, zero marketing budget, all right, you can still use this PESO model and start creating your own content. And I'll take you, and this is where my presentation actually ends. How you could start with this, right? Like your own media content, which you can actually start. And a lot of projects are actually lacking this, Alik and others, as you guys are here, like And I don't understand why, because it's easy to do. Right now, the kind of tools that we have in the market, it's very easy to kickstart this. It's very easy to maintain this. Doesn't require huge spend on marketing. So when I say it's almost zero marketing, because eventually what you might be spending is $10, $15 on certain AI tools, which is also avoidable in certain cases if you can manually do it, if you have the bandwidth to manually do it. If you don't, then you can, spend some money on these tools and build your own media there. So, Alik, I'm assuming there's nothing else for us to, from a question perspective, so we can proceed ahead to the slide that you've actually shared now, right? Like the PESO model, right? The paid side of these things. And why I'm starting with paid, because this is number one, the most easily quantifiable thing to do. But this is one out of the four big blocks that we're going to dig in. And I'm going to spend around 4 to 5 minutes each on each of these blocks, quickly take you through this, answer your questions as they arise. And eventually I have this content map and a summary of what we're going to, what we learn from today's workshop, so to say. So paid is, as I said, right, a lowest hanging fruit. It attracts potential users in your Tam-Sam SOM. I don't know what if you remember the previous workshop that we did was about this Tam-Sam SOM, how this could actually be your target market, your total addressable market, and your particular niche. So figuring out your initial users is very important before you actually start doing paid marketing. Um, and the best part about paid marketing that it's quantifiable. You can actually target and say, hey, I want to target South America with my product, or I want to target MENA, with my product. I want to target the CIS with my product. I want to target just the Asian belt, with my service. That's the highest benefit of using a paid model. There are downsides as well. Downsides, of course, mean that you have to burn a lot of money to compete with others in the same space who are actually spending more money. And these algorithms are demand based. So the more a keyword is working, the more you have to actually pay to bring that up. And that means, your money burning cycle is bigger. So paid model, in my opinion, is more advisable to either one where you have surplus funds to spend on marketing and you're doing something very phenomenal, let's say like a TGE or a release or something really big, or for established brands who've actually raised money from external sources and want to gain this branding reputation, for them. It's not necessary for early builders to do this. This is also a performance-based, PR, so to say. So you can actually measure, as I said, and you can now also geographically target this. So you want to target Arab users, you could have a PR in this Arab side of stuff with Arabic language. So localized language can be done. That's why it's very performance-driven. One of the other benefit is that it's a guaranteed placement. So if you're moving ahead and choosing a paid model, it's for sure that you will be placed. There are tons of platforms that are there right now in the market that offer these services. So many players that do this. Um, but yeah, like the benefit is that it's a guaranteed placement. You're not placing your arrow in the dark. You know where exactly it's going to hit, what sort of impact metrics it can create using your AVE and share of voice that I talked about. So quantify your response, let's say, to the spend that you want to do on this. This could be ads, this could be paid PRs, this could be other sort of content creators or KOL workings together and stuff like that. So all of this falls under your paid tier. Um, as I said, right? So you're always linking this to a tangible outcome, which is kind of good thing about this model. And if I dig into some examples of what a paid model looks like, this is like a social media advertising being done, or any sort of sponsored content like articles, PRs, videos, AMAs, live streams, podcasts done with established players who have a say or a knowledge in the market, and you want to brand yourself and build your reputation. This is where a paid model comes up. There could also be email marketing, paid email marketings. Model is really big and exhaustive. But yeah, like there are other models, that we want to talk about more as well. But what this can basically help is to generate awareness for you, get a sort of customer engagement to you directly, like for sure targeted customer engagement. And of course, optimize and measure these sort of campaigns as we look into them. Let's go next, Alec, which brings us to something that is actually tied closely to paid, and many marketers right now don't know how to do this, or maybe they know and there's a knowledge gap, so to say. But your paid is actually even tied to earn. So when you pay for something on for your marketing campaign, it also organically attracts earned attention. So if you're, let's say, you're targeting a tier one on a mainstream news media where you have done a press release about your upcoming product release that you're doing, there will be organically new news outlets that will be looking at this and then pumping the same sort of news that they found from a paid advertising channel into a different tier, which is the earn tier. Now, what is this tier for, right? So this is more for your fans, like, so to say, the early adopters or the early people who learn what you're doing, or let's call them advocates of your product, ambassadors or supporters of your product. This is the target market for earned media. Um, as an example, this could be, as I said, right, a mention in a media outlet, or let's say an unpaid podcast opportunity for you. It basically means you've done something nice somewhere else where you may not have spent money. Most probably you may have. And that has now eventually got you to this earned media tier where you don't have to spend money and you earn this. So the repetition, or let's say the value, so to say, of this particular form of advertising is higher compared to paid. Because paid is like, hey, I have $100, there you go, give me a chocolate. And you have the chocolate, you eat it. Earned is like, I have $100, but you can't really buy that chocolate, right? So that chocolate automatically becomes of higher value. So yeah, this is what earned media is. There is no guarantee of placement for this. There is no direct cost attached to it as another advantage. There are different types of earned media. This could be either mentions, as you can see on the screen, or let's say guest articles, certain interviews, product reviews, announcements. In blogs or social media, this could be about, again, mentions, content shares, a retweet, that some partner has done for you, any other sort of review, social media interactions from a product review platform. It could be, again, the same stuff, or features, that are being highlighted saying that, hey, this is a good product for this particular thing. The last could also be awards in industries. So let's say there's an award win that has been done, which actually ties closely to your own media tier. Maybe you're invited to speak at a big conference. This is another sort of an earned media initiative that you might have unlocked for yourself. Or let's say you've been invited to some sort of an event, to give a fireside chat, or just to moderate, or, just to interact with the community, right? Like share your expertise. Also memberships, a certain membership that has been awarded to you that you can't buy, very prestigious. But yeah, this sort of stuff also works in this model. So far, a quick recap. We've talked about paid and earned models here. And now we're going to touch base on the next two models. I think probably we can go next with this. And we come down to our owned tier of the particular PESO model, right? So, and I want to spend some more time on this compared to the others, because I think a lot of you in the builders community can use this right now, right after we end this workshop. Why we should do this? Let's start with the purpose, right? So why you should actually do this is because this attracts leads and customers to you. And this is something that you can do yourself, right? So you don't have to spend. The question, right, that popped up before, I don't have a marketing budget. Great, start with your own model. Um, Big benefits: control. There's absolute tight control over the content that goes up. There is an immediate impact because you can publish a blog, talk on social media about it, and measure that impact too. You can optimize this sort of content, blogs or articles or any other stuff, video content that you do it from an SEO perspective as well. So you can have these keywords or good backlinks, that you can tie up with your owned media. And as I said, with the MarTech tools at the moment, it's quite easy to achieve this. You can do this on your website. You can do this on your social media profiles. Mostly the website should also have your blog tied up, or you can use existing blog platforms like Medium or Substack, for example, and start publishing there. So you get a channel of new users from these platforms and tie this up to your own particular, your blog, so to say, on your website. So the examples of this, of course, as I said, right, is blog post or owned media could also be like small events and meetups. I think a lot of people underestimate the value of smaller meetups. And I want to take you through to the journey of this with cypherpunks. Go ahead on my LinkedIn and check this new article that I've done about this subject of cypherpunks. This started by just simply building a newsletter, right? Like their owned newsletter, which they actually published, and people started participating in, and then it became a movement. And that sprouted cryptography, and that sprouted, eventually Bitcoins and all these sort of, privacy-driven, transparent ecosystems that we're now talking. And this didn't start now. This started really long back. If you check Eric, I'm talking about 40s, 50s, in the 90s. So yeah, there's a huge power in starting a small meetup. There's a huge power of your own media perspective and exchanging dialogue with 5 people, with 3 people, with 10 people in a room. As I said, solving the dilemma of local versus global. Start where you are. Start depends on where you're based. You could actually start a very low cost meetup where people come talk about your product or the problem that you're actually solving. Let them have a share of voice in what you're building. Own could also be newsletters, folks. So you can start building your own newsletters, which eventually is a very effective way to market, because you collect these emails where you have a consent to share information with them. And this newsletters can grow in, and you can have multiple layers of newsletters, for example, and stuff like that. One thing, I don't know if you've seen from this perspective, but comment and let us know if you haven't. Your employees, your team, your talent, your early supporters, your early backers, this is also a form of owned media, right? So they talking about your product is actually quite beneficial as well. So even if you're two builders and those two builders are constantly talking about, let's say, DeFi, or let's say RWAs, using blockchain, or let's say a game, on Telegram. This will, of course, eventually grow over time. And I'll, at the end of the presentation, if you guys stick around, share how much time it actually takes. So have your own embargo PRs, have your own blogs, have your own articles to wrap this up of own media. You have complete control over your content, which is very nice. Um, you can increase your thought leadership, which is also very, very crucial. So you could either, if you're early builder, depends on what stage of the game you are. But if you're an early builder, you could start increasing thought leadership around you as a founder, as a product builder, as a entrepreneur, as a believer in the problem that you're solving. Or you could eventually start building this around your product, if you've already created some sort of MVPs and stuff like that. So we'll go next to the last tier of the PESO model, which is shared media, right? And as the name says itself, right, shared is where you attract the wider community. So this could be your social media content. Why I've specifically placed Twitter is because in Web3, Twitter, Telegram, I think plays major role, right? Like this is where the voice happens, of is amplified via these social media, shared media platforms. So this is one of the platform, Twitter, Telegram, and then you could have other platforms, tied up depending on where you are. So have this sort of local shared platforms that you can use. Reddit is a very good shared medium to have. I could tell you another shared medium. Let's say you've registered a business in, I don't know, Liechtenstein or in Switzerland, and you can have a Google page tied to your business, and whoever your first interactions are being done, where you're giving a service or your product is being used, ask them to review your Google stuff, right? Where eventually you'll start receiving organic growth on that too. So you could have reviews, let's say, on your own particular Google Maps profile. I don't know if you folks thought about this or not, but that's another way. You could have reviews in other platforms like Glassdoor or several platforms that are out there where people can review what you're doing. This could be product and service centric as well. You could also do a lot of quotes and comments under shared mediums. Somebody else talking about this or you talking about your own product by creating sort of a content syndication, or let's say a momentum over the marketing that you're doing. So everything is running around stable coins, let's say, and then you have a product that is actually tied to a stable coin, a wallet only for stable coins, let's assume. So while this conversation about stable coins is going on, you could tie up and say, have you tried this particular wallet is only specialized for stable coins, and we support 10 stable coins, for example. So this sort of comments and engagements are also nice. If you look at influencer engagement, it's shared as well, because influencer always post on their channel and they amplify your voice, but it's on their channel, right? So it's a shared medium as well. UGC with ambassadors or with advocates or with early supporters is also a form of shared media. Now, that's the good side of shared, right? But what's the disadvantage of it? Everything has a downside, right? So here, the biggest disadvantage is that you don't have control over your content. On the contrary, the advantage is that it's very cost effective to market compared to paid channels, coming from that perspective. Another disadvantage is that this can be tricky because algorithms of social media is different, as I said at the start of this workshop, for each platform. So you may not have experience, on how, let's say, from my experience, Instagram is the easiest one right now. You could go a lot of base on that compared to LinkedIn. Instagram would be super easy. So but LinkedIn has a way to use them as well. Let's say if you comment regularly, you post regularly, you start a newsletter, and you do live streams and stuff on LinkedIn, eventually you start using the algorithm to your advantage. It takes time. On the Instagram, it's different, and the crowd that you get on Instagram versus LinkedIn is very different as well. So choose your niche, folks. That's overall the PESO model. But I'll summarize this with a nice chart that I've actually picked up, and this is Axia PR's image, where you can see all these different tiers tied up, right? Like speeches or paid media or incentive-driven media, content in specific, let's say ebooks or your white papers, which is your own media, for example, case studies about, why your product should be used or your service should be used, your employee stories, your customer stories, your reviews. Um, and then if you look at other stuff like earn, then you see the big golden middle here. This is also what it's doing is building authority for you. You're optimizing your content, you're engaging your content, you're creating authorship on Google, for example. Shared social media has a side. This also eventually with shared and owned combination attracts partnerships. So you know who are the right partners for you, which is so crucial in Web3 specifically. And you can have these sort of charity tie-ins. You could basically play around with your partnerships quite a lot using this model. If you look at earned, the intersection of earned versus shared, you have influencer engagement. I know a lot of projects who do paid marketing and own marketing and shared marketing, and they eventually start receiving earned media as a repercussion of that, where influencers come out and say, hey, look, if you look at the top KOLs, you can't really pay and get stuff from them, right? They will come if they really like if they believe in what you're doing, right? So this comes through this sort of an interaction. Earn also, of course, includes, as I said earlier, PR and publicity. So a lot of media relations come into picture, your interviews, your media pitches, op-eds, news releases, tours, kits, blogger relations, investor relations, influencer relationships, and so on. So just to sum this up very nicely, and then we dig into the last side of this workshop, which is your content map. Um, Use all the four blocks together. So build your content engine around paid, earned, owned, and shared media. I would advise you guys to start, depending on the stage where you are, with owned media and focus on that. And again, I have a timeline that how much you should focus on that with understanding of the market. But start with owned, so to say, and then eventually start building a shared, paid as well as earned media. Earned probably comes at the last side of this whole tiers of these four tiers, but owned is the one that comes in the first, and the other two are interchangeable. So, just try and implement this. Share your feedback if this was helpful for you. And with that, I'll bounce back to our Zoom screen and check with Alec if there are any more questions, and then jump to the last side of this workshop.
Mhm. All right. Yeah, you literally spoon-fed all the things that are necessary to know about Web3 media marketing. And those of you who are here on Zoom, please go for your questions, go for your cases. Please start asking questions, raise your hands, and unmute yourself. And in the meantime, I am gathering the questions coming from the broadcasts that we are having across our social media. And I already brought two questions. And let me start with one of them. And the first one says, what if the project is not something fun, but a boring B2B infra thing?
Well, even if it's a B2B thing, I'm assuming this is still not boring because B2B is where the cash flows are, right? So retail is mostly for, retail is a cash cow, look at it like that. But B2B is where the solid money pipeline is. So even if your project is not fun and it's a very enterprise focused B2B project or an infra thing, as you've mentioned here, it's absolutely fine to build a PESO model on the B2B side of stuff, right? So you would still want more enterprises to come. You would still want enterprises to use your infrastructure that you've created. So develop your PESO model and start with your own media specifically first around this, right? Like start talking how your, I don't know what exactly your infra is. Feel free to, participate in if you're here. But yeah, like depending on what actually your infra is, start marketing in the B2B space, keeping the B2C aside. And I'll give you a very quick example before we jump on the next question. I see a lot of exchanges, especially in the area where I am, there's tons of new exchanges, sprouting up. And, like, hey, there's a new exchange. I'm like, great, and there's so many exchanges here. But one thing that they are doing is they're only targeting B2C. They're only targeting retail. But then you meet certain exchanges and you're like blown up because if let's say assume the exchange market is 100 exchanges together, 80, 85 are only retail, purely focusing on that. The disadvantage is that they have to spend a lot of money to get the initial customers. It's very competitive. The users who will come will eventually go to the other, try. One might be better, the other might be even better. And depending on jurisdictions, off ramping might be easy for someone, on ramping might be easy. But if you look at that 20, which are institutional, they make more money than the 80. So having the B2B product, I'm assuming it's not boring, but you can still build your PESO model, to answer this question. Hope it was helpful. We
All
can go
right.
next.
Yeah, that was a very good question. And yeah, if you're here with us, please feel free to elaborate on your case. What kind of B2B tool is that?
Yes.
And probably we can dive in a bit deeper. And yeah, by the way, John, I was noticing your hand was raised. If you have anything to ask, please unmute yourself and go for it. Those questions which are asked by voice have a priority. So please, John, if there is something.
Okay, yeah. James. Thank for the workshop. I was able to learn a lot. Actually, I'm a representative for a new project on Ton called AI Docs. And I want to ask, what do you think is the first strategy for marketing we should focus on as a new fan project?
So can you elaborate a bit more? Like, what exactly is your product about? Like, in this side, what exactly are you targeting? Can you elaborate more, please? I think John is muted, Alec.
Yep, please, John.
Actually, we focus on
Mhm.
building our X.
I think we are losing you, John. You can try texting your message then, your question in the live chat, and let me read that aloud.
Yes.
And yeah, we have a couple of more questions, and it says, when is the right time to start marketing? My product is still an MVP, so how do we know it's ready enough so we don't burn our reputation early?
Very interesting question. And if you were there at the start of the presentation, I picked it up, because this is a very common question in many founders' minds. And it's a very natural and a very, organic question, so to say. The short answer to your question is that you can start marketing now. While your MVP is, let's say, created or not even created. In this case, you still at least have an MVP. So your short answer is to start now. And why I say this is you're not really burning your reputation, you're actually building your reputation, right? So even if you're an MVP and you pivot, let's say at a later stage, it's absolutely fine to say, hey, I tried building this. This is what I learned from this, and this is why I failed with this. And now I have this, a new product, which now I'm building. So accept your failures and successes together. You're never burning your reputation if you're honest with yourself and with people around you. And the right answer would be to start marketing it now using your own media platforms.
All right. And the next question, what marketing strategy would you advise a new project to use?
I think this is S Siri, right? I can't pronounce your last name. Sorry about that. But if you can elaborate that a bit more, S Siri, it'll be very helpful because this is too broad for me to answer. But because I want to know what your project is actually, about, right? Like what exactly is your project doing or building or solving, and then we can talk about the marketing, strategy attached to it.
All right. Another question from X says, I have a NFT collection on Get Gems. How do I do the marketing for that? And the same person also sent a message that it is on Ton.
Perfect. This is better, right? So let's say you have an NFT collection and you have it on Get Gems platform. Now, the first thing that you should do is you should start talking about the utility of your NFT, right? So what does your NFT actually do? Is it a membership based stuff or is it a collectible? What exactly is your NFT collection doing? You could possibly tie up directly with Get Gems and be on their blogs to talk about your NFT collection, which will be super beneficial for you. The second marketing that you can do is, write your own blog about how to use Get Gems and, let's say purchase or participate or buy or, lease your NFT collection. Um, the other stuff that you can, again, it depends on what exactly the NFT collection does, but potentially this could also, be around, putting this out on, as a marketing on social media and talk about comparing your NFT collection with other NFT collections or some top NFT collections in the space. So I would advise these sort of three marketing, strategies at the start.
All right. And another question says, what are the metrics in PESO model to understand that our marketing is working?
Absolutely. Very good question. And as I said, right, like right now you have these sort of marketing tech tools to quantify these models. So the benefit is that let's say you're using, and the only problem is that these tools are fragmented at this stage. There's no one tool which solves the entire stuff. So you might need a suite of tools together to work. But how you could quantify is by firstly figuring out your share of voice, by figuring out your AVE, like figuring out how many earned media mentions you got. Or let's say and you could do it for each, right? So you could actually tie up a UTM tag, for a press release that you're doing and measure, using this UTM tag, how many viewers came on your website. And this is very easily quantifiable then because now you know what exactly they did. This impact that was created by the PESO model or a particular part of the PESO model. The other thing that you can also do is you can dig deeper and look into, let's say, you've done what exactly you've done in PESO depends, but let's say you've done a social media post. So you can see how many people participated, what was the click-through rate, what was the heat map, while a certain campaign was done. And you can figure out what people like, that the narrative, which basically, I think we should for sure have another workshop on narratives in PR, as I speak on this. But your narrative can also be amplified with this, right? So that also becomes what I mean to say in simple terms. Let's say you create a hashtag and you use that hashtag along with the PESO model, and then you measure that hashtag using a hashtag tool to figure out how many times this hashtag has been done. The tool to use could be as simple as Google Alerts in this case. So you put down a hashtag, put that hashtag into Google Alerts, do your PESO model stuff, measure, after 2 weeks, what sort of impact that hashtag created for you. So yeah, that's the answer.
Let's quickly cover a couple of more questions, and for sure we'll always happy to see you on our stage with future workshops about narratives, about anything else.
Yes.
I think we have a lot of topics to explore. And what about KOLs? Are they worth the money for an early project, or is it better to just focus on building our own community first? Yeah, I think I can make a remark here that about 80% of founders are very technical. They are mostly engineers, and usually they don't even have anyone to delegate their marketing to. And yeah, some of the marketing questions might be very basic. Some of the marketing questions can be very hard as well. And speaking about KOLs, I think there is not that uh, it is not very obvious to understand what strategy should a startup use when working with KOLs, because we have heard a lot of different opinions, and I think that would be great to your opinion here as well, Zain.
I second your opinion too, Alec. I assume that if you're in early stage, and this is no right or wrong, but at an early stage, I think if you spend your money on your own media, it's better. Eventually, over a time period, or depends on what sort of impact you want to create, KOLs do play a very big role, but they're sometimes difficult to manage. So, and then you should know what KOLs you should go for. So if you have that budgets, okay. If you don't, and if you're just an early stage builder, then probably not, would be my point of view on this.
All right. And what AI tools are used by marketers?
Yes, this is something that I can at the end of the day, and at the end of this workshop, I'll give you my handles to stick around with me either on LinkedIn or Telegram, and I can share with you a suite of tools that I use personally. Some of them are really nice and cool, and they're all AI-driven tools now. So I'll share with you a more detailed set of tools, but this is more for every tool has its own specification, right? So Perplexity, for example, is a research-oriented AI tool versus ChatGPT, which is great for summaries, Idea Map, which is great for creating content maps, for example. So it varies from your purpose, but I'm very happy to share the sort of tools that I personally use, out there in the market for you to try out. Yes.
All right. And let's cover one more question, and after that, I think we can wrap it up since we are running out of time. And
Yes.
Joan, uh, we have some clarification about the previous case that when we were losing Joan. It says this what my project is all
Project is
about.
about.
AI Doc is a groundbreaking project blending AI and blockchain within the Telegram ecosystem, delivering an innovative tap-to-earn game and Doc blends NFT platform. What marketing strategy would you advise a new project to use? This is, yeah, the second question, second time seeing
Yeah,
this.
thanks. Thanks for this question, Joanne. I think you're a tap to earn game here, and then you have your own Doglands NFT platform tied to it. Um, what I would advise as a marketing strategy is to, of course, either tie up with existing tap to earn games and integrate your own tap to earn into their ecosystem, or think of a use case where other top apps on Telegram can have an integration to your NFT platform and get you traffic there. I think another marketing strategy that'll be cool for you is to, I'm sure you're already doing this, but boosting your own Telegram group or participating in sort of events that are happening across the globe with Ton, and talk more about you know the the merge of AI and blockchain that you're doing within the Telegram ecosystem. Yeah.
Mhm. All right. Yeah, I think this is it for today. That was very productive one. I really enjoyed listening to your workshop, Zen, and to all that questions. I think we could cover even more questions if we would have more time, but still, this is not the last workshop with Zen, and we are always happy to see Zen here next time. Thank you for your time. Thank you to everyone who've been joining here or watching us as a recording. Those of you who found this video on our YouTube channel, please feel free to join the Nest program and address your questions there, and I can address them to Zain later. And yeah, tomorrow we will be having another workshop, same time like today, but that will be with the founder of Meme Hustle. That's a project on Ton, which has over 200,000 monthly active users. That will be dedicated to the topic of the early stage playbook, and the founder of Meme Hustle will share their experiences about what they have gone through when building the project. And yeah, stay tuned for the updates. Thank you everyone once again.